Hey Cynics, my name's Brad, and I wanted to talk to you for a minute about Millennials because we are the worst. Just kidding, we're awesome, and the word millennial is complete bullshit. I hate that word. It's actually, when you delve into it, completely meaningless. So let's start out with a little bit of who are we? Who are millennials? Well, technically, we're people born in or after 1982. The term was originally coined by William Strauss and Neil Howe. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Howe. To describe the generation of people that would be entering high school in the year 2000. So it makes a little bit of sense in that context back in 1987 when I guess they decided a word needed to be made for their children, that they would be coming of age in the new millennium, and therefore the word millennial was spawned. Then it was adapted by other baby boomers in the press and other things like that to describe everyone born between 1982 and 1995. After 1995, you have Generation Z, which is a thing. I found that out researching this, but nobody's ever heard of it because nobody likes to complain about them. So, you have baby boomers, who, by the way, are the only officially designated generation in the history of humanity. Everything else, Generation X, Generation Y, Millennials, Generation Z, the greatest generation, none of those are technically real names of the generations. That's just what everybody kind of went along with. But the baby boomers are different because they were one of the largest population growths in the history of the United States, and really even today, the millennials, which I hate using that term, are kind of close to those numbers. So we deserve a name, but we didn't give that name to ourselves. Which is a trend you may notice with any offensive term that is used to describe a large group of people. They didn't come up with it. So, the only time that you see the word millennial is when it's used by an older generation to describe the traits of someone that they hate. A young, scary person on the train who's doing something that they didn't expect, that shocked their brain, and they just didn't understand what they were doing or why they were doing it. They're a millennial. They're using the newfangled technologies and looking down at their book faces on the phones. And I hate it. I hate it because you never, ever see the word millennial used in a positive light. So let's talk for a minute about what makes our generation a little bit more unique than past generations and why I hate seeing us be generalized in this way. Well, for starters, we grew up in a world that has the internet, which, is really probably the determining factor in why we behave so differently. We have social media, we can keep up with people's updates constantly. We always know what everybody is up to. We know what our favorite celebrities are up to. Anytime we want to know something, we can instantly know it. And that has really shaped the way that we approach the world. We generally don't accept not having knowledge of something and just move on with our lives, which, in my opinion, is a beautiful thing. I really enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that I have the ability to live that life, but it does kind of look like we're always on our phones sometimes, and I don't necessarily think that's a negative thing. Other generations had things that they did. I mean, this is just what we were presented with in the world. There was a market demand for something, it was filled, and we utilize it. That's about it. We grew up in an environment of constant change. When my mother grew up, they had one phone. They had the phone in the house. It was a corded phone. It had a mile-long cord. I've heard stories about this phone. So they had one phone, and they had that phone from the time my mother was a young child, just barely old enough to remember things, until she moved out. If I have a phone longer than like 6 months, I'm annoyed with my phone. We grew up with this constant change, and everything around us is being shaken up constantly. Technology is increasing at such a rapid rate nowadays. If something comes up that absolutely shakes the foundation of what we know about the world, we typically embrace that. We never deny it or try to disprove it outright. We will research it, that's something we do, but if all of a sudden we found out, oh, you can just make gravity by splitting a piece of wood in half this certain way and doing this to it, we accept that. We adapt that to our daily lives and we find a way to utilize it. We're extremely adaptive, and we have a unique set of pressures as a generation that really make that come in handy. So that leads me to why I'm so annoyed by this term and the way that it's currently used. I'm annoyed by the way it's currently used mainly because it's already attached to this downright derogatory meaning. It's when you say millennial, even I, as a millennial, picture a total douchebag. That's just what is associated with the word millennial. And I don't like that is the descriptor for my entire generation. Someone who's too attached to their phone, who needs a trophy for everything, who's too entitled, their life was super easy. In all of these illustrations of a millennial, they always seem to be rich. And I don't know that I've ever met broker individuals than the hardest working people that I know, myself included. I've never heard of anybody in my family. I've heard of them being poor, but not as poor as I am for as long as I have been. And that's fine. I'm not mad at it, but I had a lot of help along the way, and I still do. I've got an amazing support system in my family, but I don't really get stuff just handed to me that often. I've got to work for stuff, and everybody I know that's my age is fully willing to put in that work, and we get treated like a lazy generation. We're called by some the trophy generation because participation trophies are a thing, and we receive them. But a key point of the participation trophy is that we're not giving them to ourselves. We're being given them by the previous generations. It was their idea. It was their idea for the participation trophy. All of this crap, our lives being easy, everything being handed to us, the idea of what we are supposed to do with our lives is given directly to us by the generations that are now judging us for it. Previous generations used to get a job. I've heard story after story about a man needs a job, so he gets a job at a company sweeping the floors, and you know what? He's loyal to that company. He cares about that company. He sweeps floors for years. Then he gets promoted. Now he works in the mailroom. On and on and on. Now that man is the CEO of the company. Okay, that's not the world we live in anymore. That's not how... Everybody is disposable now. There is no job that I can think of off the top of my head that has any sort of respectable upward mobility. There are sales positions that if you just absolutely work your ass off at, you may get promoted to a management position, but I've never witnessed anybody, myself or, even a couple years older than me, achieve any sort of upward movement in their company that would reflect what people seem to think the world operates like in that business model. It just doesn't happen. The only times I've ever gotten a raise in my life, and I'm 28 years old now, the only raises I've ever had were because I quit the job I was at to go to a different one. That's just how it works, and I don't have a problem with it. I just have a problem with being judged for the fact that I've had a lot of jobs. I do what I have to do. That's what our generation does. We do what we have to do because previous generations kind of screwed the pooch a little bit on the economy and the job market in general. They place a heavy importance on going to college and getting a real job so that we can buy a house and have a car and raise a family and have a white picket fence, but they're the same generation that replaced jobs that you would get right out of college with unpaid internships because they also set the requirements for all the jobs to require 3 or 5 years of experience in the field, which is impossible if you just got out of college. We're being funneled into working for free, and quite frankly, it's bullshit. So this video is getting a little bit long and ranty, but in summation, my hatred for the word millennial stems from the fact that it is a meaningless word created by a generation of people that use it exclusively to deride and chastise an infinitely diverse group of people for behaviors and habits and lifestyles that have been force-fed to them from a young age by the very people who are blaming them for doing those things. And honestly, I don't even really have a solution. We could name ourselves, we could pick our own name as a generation that doesn't have some sort of negative connotation already attached to it, but I feel like we'd probably do a really weird job of that, because one thing I can say about my generation is that we have a real weird sense of humor. But yeah, there are a lot more points that I wanted to put in the video, but I had to cut them out for the sake of time. But it's just a term that exists almost purely to insult us and generalize us and put us all in this bubble that we actually don't exist in. So I'm proud to be of the group of people that is referred to as millennials, but I am definitely not the millennial that, you know, the baby boomers write about in newspapers. So thank you for watching if you made it this far. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll do better in the future. It's my first video for the channel here, and hopefully I didn't bore any of you to actual death, because I would feel really guilty about that. But if you could all do me a favor and just keep thinking, stay cynical, and just don't believe everything you see or hear, because there's always more questions you could ask. Thanks for watching.